And we are back with another episode of From the Rafters. Sam and I are here recording on a Wednesday. One game left to the All-Star break for the Celtics, and we're here with Bobby Manning of CLNS Media. How you doing, Bobby?
Jack, Sam, good to talk to you guys again.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining
Fun
us.
to have you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. But yeah, Celtics have managed to string together a nice few wins here after that rough stretch. I think we all hated. Really started with that Knicks game, where they got blown out, and ever since then things just seemed off. Marcus Smart went down, and everything kind of went to shit. But everything's turning back around. What do you think, Bobby, is the biggest thing that you're seeing in these last few games that's letting the Celtics, get back to their winning ways?
Well, I think the biggest thing the last couple of games is the emphasis on ball movement. Again, the numbers were pretty staggering in terms of the assist rates and just visually what we were seeing, all the isolation, the lack of passing to the perimeter, and all the role guys just standing around. And I think a couple of things have lent itself well to that. I think there's been a more concerted effort by Kemba Walker in particular to get the ball popping, especially in crunch time. I think his passing's been outstanding, especially in that Sunday game down the stretch, finding Oshley and others on the perimeter. And even Semi, I think, has stepped up his game the last couple of weeks in that, the last couple of games in that sense. And then from the depths of the roster, Jeff Teague comes up and does a little something there, ball movement wise. I don't like his defense at all. I thought his defense was a disaster in a couple of those games, but he's a guy who can get on the ball, get downhill, draw some free throws, and get it moving a little bit and get Tatum and Brown off the ball. So there's been a lot of talk about Brown and Tatum as lead offensive ball handlers. I know on CLNS, Jeff Goodman said, one of a source he spoke with said that they can't be the leaders of your offense. I don't tend to think that's going to be true long term. I think they're so early in their development as ball handlers that you can't say that right now. But I do think there's limitations, and I do think that is where Jason Tatum's struggling the most right now. I give a little more leeway to Jaylen Brown because I think this is really his first year of being one of the top line ball handlers on this team. But that's the key right now. I think the defense has been overall decent. That's what I'd call it. I think they're 7th in points allowed. I think they're 18th in defensive rating. It's not where it needs to be at the end of the year, but it's not the problem right now. The offense was stalling. You would see it like 5-6 minutes at a time, settling for jumpers. That Dallas road trip in particular, the offense stalled for long stretches of the Pelicans game, the Mavericks game, and then finally they just got destroyed at the Hawks. And that was like a wake-up call for everybody to get that ball moving and get everybody a little bit more involved.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like you mentioned, obviously, this is Brown's first year as a main, guy on the team, being a playmaker. And I've even thought he's done a better job of getting the ball moving than Tatum has this year. And then you bring up Jeff Teague. I know Sam loves him some Jeff Teague, right?
Well, Jeff Teague, I'm very happy he's playing well. I don't dislike him as a person, but when he's not playing well, it's so frustrating. And I think the method going forward with Jeff Teague should be, and I think I said this on a pregame, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if he's not playing well, they need to have a short leash with Jeff Teague. Because when he's good, he's been really effective. Opening night against Milwaukee, he was maybe the best guy in the preseason. He was really consistent from three. And going into the season, I remember we were all kind of like, wow, that's a good signing. He's so much better than Wanamaker, blah, blah, blah. And he's really not, at least overall, not right now. But he's been pretty good over these last couple games for sure. It's super nice to have him going to the basket, getting some easy looks. So I'm happy he's playing well.
He misses a lot of those easy looks, though. And
very true.
And
he's gotten a little better.
Yeah, I mean, he was at rock bottom there. I've never seen a guy have like a 36% three-point shot the way he did and then be shooting under 30% from two. And that's where he was at before he got benched for the couple weeks that he was. And what I do like about him in that sense, with the downhill drives and getting to the basket, is he draws a ton of free throws. I looked at before last game, and he's right around 100th in the league, which, isn't a huge accomplishment, but given his rate of play and his role on this team in general, to have a guy who barely ever plays be like a top 100 free throw rate guy is pretty good. So he's bringing something at this point, which is way more than he was giving them for the couple weeks that it looked like he was pretty much just a lost cause on this bench. Now, ultimately, I think he's going to have to go if they need a roster spot for another guy, because they're going to have Smart, they're going to have Pritchard, they're going to have Kemba, after the All-Star break here, and I don't think there'll be a role for him on the team. But these last couple games, he definitely infused a boost on that bench unit. Yesterday in particular against the Clippers, the bench unit between him, Pritchard, and Rob was what gave them the advantage of that game.
Yeah. And I remember when I was particularly mad at Jeff Teague, I did some research, and he ranks, I think, 10th in the league in isolation percentage, which is a little bit ridiculous considering the guys around him are Giannis, Jason Tatum, CJ McCollum, and those guys. But obviously it's in a smaller sample size, but it was really eye-opening to look at, him ranking right next to Tatum in ISO percentage.
I did. So, Sam, you mentioned Wanamaker. It drove me crazy for a while that they gave up Wanamaker. I thought you invest 2 years in this guy. He was pretty good, especially on the defensive side of the floor. Could knock down some shots. He had a huge game 5, I think it was, against Toronto. And to let him go over a couple $1 million, it seemed like. I know there were rumors that he wasn't thrilled with his role here and wanted to kind of find a new place to go. So maybe there was no chance of keeping him, but I didn't like that at first, especially since we saw Teague last year struggle mightily with Atlanta. The Minnesota fans weren't happy with him. So it was evident what he was going to be bringing here. The thinking was if Kemba's out for 2-3 months, you're going to need a guy with a little more firepower, but he was just so inconsistent. But at this point, seeing what Wanamaker's done in Golden State, it's been pretty bad. I think it's kind of a wash there.
Mm-hmm. Either guy, it's just
there was another guy I was hoping they bring in, but he went to Atlanta. Yeah. Rondo.
Yeah,
I thought Rondo would have been a great bench guy for this team, but
he was a little expensive.
Yeah, they paid him a lot of money.
He's getting
how much does he make
a year?
Yeah, wow. $7 million.
Wow, that is a lot of money. But yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Bobby, the point guard rotation post All-Star break, once Marcus Smart is back, realistically, it'll look a little better because you'll have him, you'll have Pritchard still, who had a great game that I want to talk about, and Kemba Walker. But yeah, Pritchard obviously covered up for a couple rough performances in the last game against the Clippers, and he has strung together a few good games now. And I saw some people on Twitter not panicking per se, but getting worried that shooting wasn't at where it was at the start of the season. But I like Pritchard, and I am even borderline like, if you're making a trade, do whatever possible to keep Pritchard on the team. So that's my thoughts on Pritchard. Now I wanted yours, Bobby. What do you think of Pritchard's season so far and his future with the Celtics, I guess?
I think the question right now with him is that he's undoubtedly going to be a good bench player in this league, a guy who can hit shots off the catch. I found it amazing that he was able to get open off catch and shoot threes a couple times when they were doubling Tatum. It didn't seem like a great personnel move to leave him open in that spot, but he had been struggling so much that I think the Clippers said, we'll take that over some of these Tatum drives and isolation opportunities, and that got him going. I think it was much like Daniel Tice on Sunday, just got wide open shots and was able to get going off of those. That's a great way to find your game, is to get the most wide open shots imaginable. And I think over the first 10 or so games of the season, he was one of the better catch and shoot guys in the league. His shot was just through the roof, and he was able to get into the lane and position guys for easy shots with great passes, and his floor spacing off the dribble and all that kind of stuff was just so useful for ramping up this offense a little bit, because this team moves slow. They really are. They're stagnant. They kind of just low on offense a little bit sometimes. There's not a whole lot of pace to this team. When he would come in there, there'd be some great energy. There'd be some, downhill intensity and even a little more transition play. He knew how to get the ball into the zone. Now, since the injury, I think it's pretty evident that the injury impacted him. I don't see him getting to the rim as much. I don't see him getting wherever he wants on the floor with his dribble and his burst. I think speed is showing to be a big part of his game, so he's going to need all of that. But overall, I think he's been a godsend for this team in terms of guard depth, in terms of bench scoring, secondary passing. Those are the 3 biggest needs on the team coming into this year and what we've seen from them so far, and he has filled all of those and then some. And isn't it surprising? He's a pretty good defender, at least positionally.
Yeah.
Like, he's in the right space.
And he plays hard.
Yeah.
Can't ask for much more from him. I mean, he makes the big play. He made a couple threes yesterday that were that had to go in. Like, that killed momentum for the Clippers. They're deep too. I mean, he's so confident out there. It just makes it so easy for him to get minutes. And I know that he believes in himself.
I loved him in college too. I watched a lot of college the last 2 or 3 years before this because I was covering it at Syracuse, and late nights Oregon would be on against Washington and Arizona with Ayton and some of these other guys out there. They'd have a lot of national TV games, and you saw all the stuff, like the energy, the confidence, and the aggressiveness. Like he has a untypical aggressiveness for a rookie. You see so many rookies over the last few years with the Celtics. They're tentative. They stand in the corner. They don't want to get involved all that much. I think Semi Ojeleye, as much as anyone, the contrast between him at SMU and the way he's approached his game with the Celtics, it's a lot hands off. And I know they hadn't drafted a point guard in a while. That's a little different, where you're going to have a guy who's going to be on the ball and, of course, needs to do something with it. But his assertiveness from game one, to be able to get into the lane, take a bunch of shots, and take tough shots at that. He hit a floater yesterday I know people were going crazy because Tatum was open to his right or something like that, but it ended up being a key shot in what was a 1-possession or 2-possession game at that time. Mm-hmm. You're right, Sam. Just the aggression and the confidence right now for a rookie is through the roof. And he'll probably be a rising star, right? I know some of those are trickling out today.
No. He didn't get in.
Ooh.
Did not get in.
Come on.
Big
Who got
snub.
in? So I saw Wiseman. Who else?
I got a list for you. I tweeted out fast PP snub when the list came out because of Shams.
That's stunning.
Yeah, I really thought he had a shot at it. It's the U.S. So it was U.S. and world roster, obviously. The U.S. roster was Zion, Ja Morant, LaMelo, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, Tyler Hero, DeAndre Hunter, Keldon Johnson, Michael Porter Jr., and James Wiseman. So a lot of guys from last year's draft class, which is a little lame. But
all right, so I hadn't paid attention to that in a couple of years because I don't know where that shifted. I thought they used to do rookies versus sophomores.
They did. They used to,
yeah. And so if that was the format, he would have easily made it. But now I understand why all the sophomores made it from pretty good class a year ago.
Mm-hmm. But the world roster is, I mean, not to shit on the world roster, but I mean, Precious Achiuwa, fine. Denny Avdia, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, RJ Barrett, Facundo Campazzo, Brandon Clark, Lou Dort, Rui Hachimura, Theo Maledon, and Michael Mulder. Like, if that was rookies versus sophomores, I feel like Payton Pritchard would have gotten in, but the U.S. roster is just absolutely stacked, and it's unfortunate they're not actually playing the game because the U.S. roster would absolutely dominate the world roster this year. It would have been entertaining to watch. But yeah, you mentioned Payton Pritchard, the confidence. Obviously, Celtics hadn't drafted a point guard in the roster. Last one was Terry Rozier, probably, right? Realistically, like
Carson Edwards,
Carson, yeah,
and
okay,
Waters.
Carson and Draymond last year.
Edwards really hasn't proven to be a point though.
Yeah,
at this level.
Yeah, I think Pritchard has actually been everything they've really hoped Carson Edwards would be, and probably like a little bit more. I mean, he is the spark off the bench, but like he's really confident with the ball, and he seems to make decent decisions with it. So that's super helpful because they don't have Marcus right now, and it lets them not play Jeff Teague as much when he's not playing well. So it's big.
Pritchard.
Help.
Rob kind of overshadows Pritchard because there was kind of a quiet call when Kemba was coming back early to start Pritchard and run that unit. What was the unit that was killing it early this year? I think it was Pritchard, Smart, Tatum, Brown, and Rob. Like that unit was just a monster toward the beginning of the year. And obviously Smart went down and the Jays haven't been as great since then. But they never got an opportunity to run that unit at a high rate. And the calls were to start Rob and start Pritchard, just start the best five, and that was the best five at the time. So I don't know if that unit is ever going to resurface, but I think what we're seeing with the calls for Rob to start and the calls for Pritchard to start that have kind of died down since he struggled a little bit in the month since, is we have that one game against Detroit where he started, and I think he was 1 of 4. He just kind of he got swallowed up. There's been a couple games where he's just kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. I think Brooklyn, the second game of the year, he was pretty rough. There's been a handful of others, and it's mostly been when he's been called upon for big minutes against starting level players. So that's the question with him. Is he going to be a starter in this league? Because in the opportunities he's gotten, I don't know if it's size. I don't know if it's some of the other point guards just have a better rap on him defensively in those spots. Is he going to be able to thrive in those opportunities? Because right now, with the call for Pritchard and Rob, you got to ask, are they just dominating opposing second units? Are they in the perfect position to succeed role-wise right now, or are those guys really budding starters in this league who need to be playing more? Because in the roles they're in right now, they're exceeding all expectations.
For sure. And I feel like with the years of experience, Pritchard will improve in that sense. I'm not sure what his floor and ceiling is and everything, but I wanted to bring up the other guy you're mentioning because Robert Williams has been on an absolute tear lately. Like he's all over Twitter. That's all anyone's talking about. He's getting closing minutes now over Daniel Tice. I mean, you could argue it's matchup based, but he's playing well in the opportunities he's getting. So, what do you think of Time Lord lately, Bobby?
The numbers are jarring, and the visual is jarring as well. And he's so fun to watch, and the promise there is through the roof. I just wonder why. There's got to be a reason. I don't think Brad Stevens is dumb or Brad Stevens is stubborn or any of the stuff that people seem to think is holding Rob Williams back from that spot. There's a couple of things bouncing around there. The hip injury, which is real. We've talked about that a lot in post-game. I don't know why some people think that's an excuse or like not a concern. I guess Rob said he's not feeling too bad, but I think that's a product of the minutes and limitations that have been on him. I think they're doing a good job managing him health-wise. He's only missed 2 games this year. Last year he missed 34, and they missed him a lot during that stretch. So I do think the big reason he's here is because of some health concerns. I know there was a lower body blood flow condition that got revealed in the draft process. So I wonder if health is going to kind of be that thing throughout his career that's going to hold him back from being able to be a 30, 35-minute per night guy in this league. Because production-wise, number-wise, per 36, and just what we're seeing in front of us, impact-wise, I don't think there's any question to Brad Stevens that he should be a guy who is a prominent part of their rotation. I just wonder if behind the scenes, medically, they're like, we can't push this past 25 minutes a night, because that's the only thing I can think of right now. He does make mistakes. He does do frustrating things, but we're seeing less and less of that. And so over the last 2-3 weeks, as far as his case to play more and his impact on the team, I mean, this team's what? A 113 defensive rating? And when he's on the floor, it's 101, 102, which would be best in the league by far. And so you see that, and you see the need that they have on that side of the floor, rim protection. It's unquestionable that if they can get him in a position to close games at the end of this year, if he can hit free throws a little bit better, if he's not fouling, some of these things that you can't do in crunch time, he's going to raise the ceiling of this team significantly. And I'll add this too, before I let you guys hit on it. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, we talk about them at the beginning of the show as ball handlers. They need that outlet. They need the lobs. They need the downhill threat. And they need the guys who can pull the defense back with that verticality so they can pull up and hit some jumpers there. Tristan Thompson, even Daniel Tice this year with the role adjustment he's gone through, they really haven't been interior threats at the rate and efficiency that 2 guys like that who run as much pick and roll as they do need. So it's not just, oh, Rob's amazing, they need to get him involved. I mean, Rob can really help those guys be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree. I think Robert Williams has been nothing short of excellent. I think anybody that's watched the games can see that. It's not an expert take from me. One thing about Brad Stevens, though, is I do feel like he's stubborn, but not in a bad way. I think he really wants to hammer it home that like these guys are earning their starting spot. Like an example is Pritchard when he was on fire to start the season, and they played the game with like no point guards against Toronto, and he started Tremont Waters instead of Pritchard. I think that was just something he did just to like say, all right, like he's got to earn this spot. But the health concerns with Robert Williams are definitely real, like you say.
He had COVID too.
And he had COVID.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that he'll eventually get ramped up, because I think that's what they're saying the plan is, right? As the season goes on, they're going to ramp him up.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Brad praised him to the moon yesterday. I do think you're right, Sam, in the sense that he's going to try to suppress, and all coaches do this. They suppress the call from the fan base or the call from the media to play some guys who are on the bench or in a certain role that they've decided. They don't want the people outside the locker room to sign the rotations for them. I've seen every coach I've covered has had some degree of that. Mm-hmm. But the notion that he's seeing this now and he's feeling it and he agrees with people that this is going to get ramped up as time goes on, I don't think you can argue against that. And let's be real, with more responsibility and more minutes, there'll probably be more of the downside shown there. There'll probably be more struggles. There'll probably be more ups and downs that people have to contend with. If you're talking about his role right now, it's perfect. Like there's really no downside to the way they're using him right now. It's all plus whenever he's out there. They're outscoring opponents by almost 30 points per 100 in his minutes. So there's that argument to be made, I think, that his role right now is perfect. And, Tristan's been real good over the last 3 weeks. Tice has been awesome for a month and a half now. So I have As far as concerns on this team go, the way they're using the center position is like the lowest of the low on the level of concern. They're getting great production there.
He really is just instant offense when he's on the
Yeah.
floor. Like
he's
literally
like
just
a
throw it
free
to him.
plug him in, and you just throw it up, and you're gonna get points.
Slam it down.
Yeah, it's automatic.
It's great. It's amazing. I love to see it. And I mean, another guy I talked about in his post-game conference the other night is Kemba Walker. And I have written on my little note sheet here, Kemba Walker, good again, question mark, just because he's been playing better. And I think a lot of
Catholic
Celtics fans,
Jack? Come on.
they jumped the gun a little bit, a lot of fans on Kemba Walker. I know Sam and I were never on the trade Kemba train. Obviously, you got to think about it.
I was close. I was
But what are you thinking about Kemba, getting back into form as of late?
It definitely raises the ceiling of the team. So you're back to 4 guys potentially when Smart gets back who can score 20 points on any given night, which was kind of the formula last year. And we just had on the bench being better than last year as well. So I don't necessarily know if the team's going to be in a better spot come playoff time than last year. I do think Hayward in particular is just such a massive loss in that sense that, even if Kemba is playing at a high level and even if Smart's playing at a high level, they both probably don't even collectively meet his whole impact on the game defensively and offensively. But Kemba in particular, they're so starving for offense on this team that even with a little bit of an efficiency drop that we've seen from him this year, and it was a big efficiency drop to start the year, he was in the 30s from the field coming back from this for the first 10 or so games. And then over the last 9, we're talking 44%, which I think is what you want from the field, and 42% from 3. That spot up around the screen is there for him. I just wonder if certain aspects of his game are going to be gone, and the one I'm hammering in on is finishing. When he goes to the rim this year, and I think it's been pretty consistent throughout, he gets swallowed up, he gets blocked. Zubac threw down a big block on him late last night. He can command that spot on the floor. I think he can get in there and pass out of there, but is he going to be able to finish at a consistent rate? Is that step back 2-pointer as good as it once was? I think his efficiency has lagged a little bit from that spot as well, but he's such a great shooter that I think he's going to be able to transition into a role, and people aren't going to like it because you sign a $35 million contract and you're expected to be a star, you're expected to be all NBA, and anything less than that is viewed at that point as a massive disappointment. But I think he's a great enough shooter and scorer that he can transition into this next role, and we've seen a little bit of it, just a glimpse, but a little bit of him getting off the ball more, him getting into more catch and shoot and movement opportunities. And I think that's the only way he's going to be able to score at the rim, too. I think his days of being able to get around a pick and roll and get downhill and finish past guys with whatever step he's lost, I think we all can agree he's lost at least a step off that all-star start to last year. That's going to hurt him a little bit in terms of being a top option on this team. So the last 2 weeks have been encouraging, but they've also been concerning because they've been trying to force it back to him. They've been getting him on the ball a lot more for the thing we talked about with ball movement, with ball control. I think when he's on the ball, they turn the ball over a lot less, which has been a problem this year. But it also gets Jalen off the ball. And that's something I've been talking about since the early stretches of the season. When all 3 guys are out there, there's Jalen kind of ended up being the odd one out with ball time. And I think we've seen Jalen slip just a little bit production-wise over the last couple of weeks because of the fact that Kemba's been fed the ball, commanding the offense, and it's left Jalen to be more of a transition and spot-up shooter and catch-and-shoot kind of guy, which I thought was a big problem last year in the playoffs. Like Jalen, when he was able to get a ton of shots and get a ton of time on the ball, his upside scoring was like 25, 30, efficient. And even if he took what was the highest level of shots? I think he took 30 shots in Game 6 of that Raptors series, and he wasn't extremely efficient, but for 30 shots, I thought Jaylen Brown-wise, it was pretty impressive the efficiency he did show at that level of shots. So I feel like Jalen could take anywhere from 15 to 25 shots a game and be extremely efficient with it, 56% from the field, plus 40 from 3. And I want that. I mean, that's what drove this team to an 8-3 start, right? So you do have to ask the question, Sam, can Kemba transition to the third man role on this team? It's going to be a tough one. I don't think he's ever been in a role like that in his life. And it's hard to argue in this current moment to throw Brown above him because Brown's still so early in his development as a ball handler and facilitator. So they're both at kind of an awkward point in their careers. They're kind of hits against each other, I think, a little bit.
See, I think to go with your point of him being the third option, and not right now. I think he's been, playing fine, and they shouldn't do this just yet. But when the time comes, whether they trade for a point guard or whatever, if they eventually decide they want to bring him off the bench as like a 6-man kind of deal, I feel like that could work for him, at least later. Right now, I think he's getting better at not getting blocked at the rim every time. Like when he first got back, it was really bad. Mm-hmm. Like he would get blocked like time and time again. But like lately, I feel like he's starting to figure out a bit. He did get blocked yesterday, but like I don't remember a whole lot recently where he's getting absolutely like demolished like he was, because it was real bad. I think he's slowly getting back up to speed, but I think Jalen not having the ball is an issue. I think that's a good point because, like you said, he was crazy good to start the year. It's the reason he's an all-star. Probably should have been a starter, just because of how efficient he's been, how many points he's been able to score. And, I mean, we saw it yesterday. In the first half, he was balling out.
6 of 6, and then he finished 2 of 8.
It's weird. Yeah. The second half fall-off was weird last night for Jaylen Brown. But overall, I mean, Kemba was able to carry the load. That was good to see. Something else I wanted to talk about is just the two guys that the Celtics apparently just don't like, or I don't know what's going on. Romeo Lankford and Aaron Nesmith, man. When is Romeo going to play, and why isn't Nesmith playing? Those are two questions I wanted to ask. So if you want to touch briefly on both, or just your thoughts on those two guys, Bobby.
Well, I'm going to say this about Lankford. I think he's right around the corner. You saw Tice drop a little something on that after the All-Star break, they do expect to have both those guys out back, Smart and Lankford. So I think they just didn't want to rush it before the break when they do have a 6-day span to integrate them a little bit, probably get them back in the facility and practice toward the end of that break. They haven't had any practice time whatsoever, so I don't know when they would have been integrating them in and getting them rolling, and they've been traveling a ton, so all those different things made it impossible, I think, to get him back and integrate with the team in the first half of this season, especially when they were taking it more slowly with the wrists there. I think it was more of a major procedure than a lot of people thought, and that you need a little bit more time on the back end, and then he's got to get a shot going again, which he's been working on for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks now. He's been shooting pregame and doing a little work in that sense, and now it's going to be conditioning. It's going to be all the different things you look at. The good news on conditioning is you are able to run, treadmill, that kind of stuff with a wrist injury. So I don't think it's going to be as big of a comeback as it is for Smart, who's not running much at all as of a few weeks ago. So I think you'll probably see Lankford first, and then you'll see Smart out of this break. Smart's going to be slow and steady. OG Anunoby had a similar injury for Toronto, and he even, after missing 10 games, was still, sitting back-to-backs, that kind of stuff. It's still, I mean, this season took a dark turn, and it's crazy to think about what it could have looked like if Smart's injury went the way it looked at the time. So it's so fortunate that they're going to be getting him back on. But to hit on Nesmith and Lankford, quick on Nesmith, I think he got his 7-game run or so of 15, 20, 25 minutes even in certain of those games. He got a chance to stretch the floor in crunch time, but I think he was so uninvolved offensively that it sort of negated his impact. He came here to be a floor spacer and knock down 3-point shooter, and he wasn't doing much of either of that. And so credit to him, he changed his game a little bit, and he just became this all-out hustle guy. He looked like almost like Jay Crowder when he first got to the Celtics with the approach he was going with there, just running all over the place, diving on the floor. He did whatever he could in that sense to continue to get those minutes. But what they needed from him was a guy to move the ball a little bit, knock down shots and rhythm on offense, and then eventually they decided that we need ball handlers out here right now. We need guys that are going to be able to get some assists and just get the offense rolling a little bit. And his role on that side of the floor wasn't conducive to that. So I think they turned back toward Jeff Teague, and Semi Ojeleye got a big ramp up in minutes. And some of the guys are able to do that a little bit better. Even Javonte Green, who played so well against the Wizards down the stretch, he gets the ball moving a little bit in transition. He's able to get some passing lane steals and stuff like that. His positioning defensively is strong. So people go nuts because they're not impressed by Green. They're not impressed by Ojeleye in particular. Ojeleye just has the disdain from this fan base in a way that I can't comprehend. Like he's Ojeleye. He is what he is. He's doing what he can. So I don't think it's crazy to think that those guys, I mean, Ojale's a 4-year veteran at this point. Green is like in his late 20s of playing professional basketball. For them to be miles and miles ahead of a guy who got drafted 2-3 months ago shouldn't be all that surprising to people. I mean, Neesmith, I think what shocks people is he was supposed to be ready to go right away. But the fact that a guy who was, just 21 coming in and didn't play a ton as a junior, those kind of things, and his quick entry into this league make me a little more willing to wait and see on him. It is disappointing. I thought, too, he was going to be a guy who could play and maybe start potentially right away given the role he's going to fill, but it didn't work. And they gave him his chance, and that's all you can ask. Everyone was just looking to give him a chance, and he got about 7 games in a row. And listen, you can't argue with the results the last 3 games. He hasn't played, and they've thrived, and the offense has been better, and they've won.
Mm-hmm. Sam, what are you thinking of Neesmith or Romeo?
I think Neesmith has been not what we expected, like you say. We thought he was going to be the shooter that Saddiq Bey is or was against the Celtics that one game. But yeah, like he hasn't been knocking down his threes. I'm not super worried about that though, because his form looks sweet. He has a really good motion. Looks like he's capable of knocking down shots, and his hustle has been like found money almost. So when he eventually does figure out how to be an impact on offense, maybe next year, maybe later in the season, depending on how injuries go or whatever, he's going to be someone out there that's going to be a real difference maker on both ends of the ball because of his Marcus Smart-like ragdolling, diving after the balls. Like, he wants to make the best impact he can, even if he's not scoring.
Yeah, for sure. And I wrote about Saddiq Bey and Desmond Bane, so it's a painful.
Desmond Bane, who they drafted and got rid of.
Yeah, Desmond Bane and Saddiq Bane.
Those ones are so hard, though. Those ones are hard because those guys get opportunity that just isn't available in Boston. And I know Bane's been amazing, and Bey has killed the Celtics. I mean, his production's been kind of average otherwise. We have these guys, we know about them, that just come out and kill the Celtics. Who was it a few weeks ago? Jalen Brunson on the Mavericks had the best game of his career against them. So that's going to be a guy to watch.
Middleton.
Saddiq Bey is going to be
Fournier's your guy.
Pain. It's just it's painful to watch. But speaking of Fournier,
yesterday, Reggie Jackson, he had no business playing good yesterday.
Reggie Jackson, I couldn't believe what he did yesterday. Oh Lord. I came into that game saying they don't really have a facilitator, a point guard in that sense, without Kawhi out there. And then he comes out and has the game he did, movement-wise and shooting-wise. It's unreal. I wonder what goes into that. It's probably something they do defensively a little bit that can let, kind of the 4th or 5th option on the floor break free or something like that.
Yeah. The guy from you was Ish Smith last year. That was
Ish Smith, another one. I was saying, I think to Jack and the guy who's just here, I was like, yeah, like they didn't have Kawhi, but Reggie Jackson had no business playing like that. So I say it evens out.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. But you mentioned Evan Fournier. That's a guy thrown around in the trade rumors for the Celtics. So the last thing I wanted to touch on before we let you go here is just obviously trades. You got to bring it up. Danny Ainge said, this team's not good enough at one point. Everyone's begging him to make a deal with that TPE. What do you see happening, or what do you want to happen in terms of trades for the Celtics this season, or just with the TPE in general?
Yeah, I hope the approach isn't tax-based. I know this year is important in a tax sense that you get out of it this year and then you're able to avoid the repeater for a couple of years. And with Tatum's extension kicking in, that throws you into the tax without any question. So they'll have no choice in the years to come, so they would rather avoid it this year. They have a decent amount of room under it because Hayward's money coming off the books obviously cleared a ton of space. So they have some room to wiggle there. I'd say it's somewhere between 19 and 20 million of that TP that they could bring in. And then there's a hard cap on top of that. So there's a hard limit in terms of what they can bring in. So they'd have to get creative with some of the big stuff that we've had our eyes on. Vucevic, they couldn't eat that 28 million outright. I don't think they have a ton of players that they could send back to Orlando that would be all that enticing. So, who's a third team that they could route assets to and try to get something in Orlando for Vucevic? I love the Vucevic idea because I think you look at that TP and you say, what's the best player available right now in all of NBA who's attainable? Because effectively this $28 million is the last chance to sign a player as a free agent. I know they can't use it on a free agent, but if you're able to eat a trade acquisition with that money, that's effectively a signing. So this team had interest in Vucevic a couple years ago. Obviously, Kemba came instead, but now you could possibly team up all four of those guys. They were going to pay Hayward anyway, something to that effect. So Vucevic's the best available guy of all of the players we've thrown around: Harrison Barnes, John Collins, Thad Young, certainly. So that one's the no-brainer to me if you can get it done. Orlando has fallen off the map quite a bit. He's expensive for years to come, so maybe you can take advantage of that with Orlando getting a little cheap there, possibly just wanting to strip things down in years to come. I do like Aaron Gordon from there, too. I think he lines up more with what the team wants to play like and what they want to be, but there's uncertainty with him. His offense has not been good, particularly from three to start his career. He's injured a lot, and he is right now, so they'd have to wait for him to come back. Maybe that makes the price a little more palatable for Boston. It would certainly be an easier trade to pull off. I'm just saying with either of those guys, you don't want to throw Smart in there. Now, Smart's going to be the interesting one when it comes to trades this year. He's expiring at the end of next season, which has been talked about a ton. Could you extend him? Is it going to have to go to unrestricted free agency? Is there money for him long term here? And do you even want to commit over $20 million a year to him at the next stage of his career? I know he's still 26, but how much rising does he still have to do? When's he going to start declining physically with the style in which he plays? It's all questions you have to ask. And if you want to get great value for him, and he obviously is a very valuable player, you might want to look at different options right now to possibly get the most that you possibly could and set yourself up for many different years to come. There's a lot of different options right now, but to get back to it, it does sound like they're gearing up to do something a little smaller. And Thad Young is that name that's been thrown around. I don't think a move like that gets the needle of the team in any interesting direction. Like he'd help. He would certainly be a reliable player at the four, which is where they need some help. But I don't know. Like I think they're looking at either a couple of different players being needed right now, point guard and wing, or taking advantage of that TP this year and some of the players that they could acquire through it. Luckily, Sacramento has lost a ton recently, so that brings up the Barnes option. This is a big conversation, and there's a debate between waiting, which is what Danny Ainge and Wick are seen to be pushing right now because the options are great in the offseason. But you lose Tice, the ability to trade him at that point. You lose the advantage of having cap space per se over other teams out there. Teams will have cap space in the offseason that they can use to acquire players through trades or free agents, which the Celtics will obviously be looking at too at that time. And then there's other things. Smart will be expiring at that point. He'll be a little less valuable in that sense if you want to look at moving him at that point. And they just need so much now. I watch on Sunday, and I know they're hurt, and there's all this talk of the starters have only played 58 minutes together. But you're always going to have an injury come playoff time. And if any injury on this team is going to lead to Green starting, to Ojeleye starting, those guys being out there in crunch time, double big, just all the stuff we've had to live with this year. Like, this team came into the year missing a player. They decided to kick the can down the road on Hayward and that they were going to address it during the season. So they could address it with a minor move, but that wouldn't taste all that good if we think they had the opportunity to add some of the things from Indiana that, Zach Lowe and others still seem pretty adamant that they possibly could have. So if they don't do anything or they do something very minor this year, that will bring me back to that. And I wasn't a huge fan of the Turner-McDermott package that was thrown around at the time, but it's looking pretty good right now given the team's needs and their asset base. And, here's the other thing, too. If you make a trade now, you can, funnel those assets into a trade down the road, whether that's Vucevic or whether that's John Collins, who I frankly seem to like a lot, especially given how much Atlanta seems to want to get rid of him or needs to get rid of him because they're not going to pay him. And then he's with the Celtics for 4 to 5 years. So that's a name that I've really enjoyed. I don't know how you guys feel about Vucevic. I do agree with some of the concerns people have out there about him and defense and fit and post-ups and all that stuff and how that would work out here. I just think you have to go best player at that spot, and he is an all-star, and he's putting up monster numbers, and this offense would fit him so well.
Mm-hmm. Sam, I know you've had some thoughts. You go ahead.
All right. Go ahead. Let's see. I was really enjoying the aspect of your take where we don't want to give up things. All right, we won't call it cheap. We'll call it thrifty.
You're cheap.
I hate giving things. But one person I was surprised you didn't mention, probably because it's not realistic. But I know you're a big Al Horford guy. What do you think of that? Because he's on a team that's not particularly trying to win. He's playing decent, probably cheap. Knows all the guys here. Mentor to Robert Williams.
Cheap to trade for, not to pay. Because that's a lot of money. But
he doesn't fit, right?
He does fit in the TP.
No. But like he fit 20.
Oh yeah.
The hard cap. Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a hard cap issue there. There's a question of how much he's got left. I know it goes way down in the third year, but still, that's what you're going to go into the tax for. That's what you're going to use all of this opportunity that they have in front of you right now. I would love Horford on the Celtics right now. I wish they re-signed him at the time. I mean, that would have been the great thing to do then. You don't get Kemba or whatever, but you would have been able to keep Rozier. I think that would have been ideal at that moment in time. But now it's a different time for Horford. It's a different time for the Celtics. The needs are different. I don't know if he moves the needle enough past Thompson, Rob, and Tice to completely funnel that opportunity and then give up some pieces on top of it to make him fit salary-wise. It's, you hate to have to analyze the game strictly through that lens, but sometimes it does just become a numbers game, and the numbers, thanks to Philly, are just way off with Horford. So I think he's got something to give, but it's not enough to completely dump the TP on him, and that's what it would require effectively.
Yeah, the Vucevic thing you brought up is, I've heard it, but you had probably the best argument. I think he probably is the best thing available, and he probably isn't super expensive in terms of, they're not particularly trying to win, and you probably could find a third team to give them something worth them giving him up for. So
I have a couple of different ideas there. I've talked to people on the Magic side who are adamant that Smart would have to be involved. I think you're losing, or you're not gaining enough on the wings to give up Smart there, unless they'd be sending back one of their wings, like a Ross or something like that. At that point, maybe you think about Smart a little bit. But ideally, I think you would line up Vucevic, Smart, Tatum, Brown, like that into the future, and then with Kemba at the point guard. So what would it cost? I'm all out on the picks. Like, if Orlando wants 4 first-rounders or 5, like the Holiday trade, I'm kind of at the point with the Celtics where it's like there's no roster spots for any more rookies. The development curve on those guys are so steep. It's so hard to pick guys where they're selecting in the draft. Just send them all over. I know it's a risk, but right now they're at a pretty important moment in Tatum and Brown's career where they look ready to win and they need help. So if you're able to get another all-star in here and have 4 if Kemba's healthy, like the argument's pretty strong to just send 4 or 5 first instead of players who can help you right now like Smart. So that's my thinking on Vucevic. I don't know how they would receive that. There's always the argument that those picks aren't that great, but if you send a ton, I think you can always entice a team like Orlando that's kind of in a rebuilding stage. So I think those picks are going to go a longer way with Orlando than they would with Atlanta in a Collins situation or Sacramento. Barnes is going to be pretty cheap at this point, I think. Like, they've sunk in a way that I think that's going to be a pretty attainable piece, and I wouldn't be mad about that one because he does fit a need. It's just he'd take 22 out of that TPE, so you lose a ton of the higher level potential that you want to see there. So, again, those would kind of be my 2 top team ideas. My other one was Collins. I think there's a lot of questions about I think there's enough questions about his game. The competition is going to be so high since he only makes $5 million, and I can't see any way you do that one without Smart. And so I think there's a good case that you could flip Smart for him and then have Collins 5 years compared to Smart for 1. I think that's a good long-term move for this team. But in the short term, does Collins make you better than Smart? That's a question you have to ask this year. That, again, I think trades this year are going to be pretty heavily based on improving you this year. And I don't think that cuts it. There's a lot of teams around the league that want Collins, that want to pay him. And I think the Celtics are probably going to be spaced out of that one a little bit. And plus, there's real concerns about his defense. And can he play center? I don't think so. I watched a lot of Hawks games last year when he played center, and it didn't go well.
It's just
Go ahead,
interesting
Jack, you
to
got
see.
next.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to see what Danny is going to do. Obviously, he has a reputation, obviously going back to the Pacers thing, of always trying to get the absolute best deal and not settling for anything less, which I think at this point, if you get fleeced a little bit, but you still get the talent, like just make it happen, right? Like obviously Tatum and Brown are still young, but like you said, Bobby, it's a very important point in their career, and you don't want them getting mad. So you want the most amount of talent around them as possible. Vucevic is what, almost 30 at this point, but
He's
regardless,
31.
yeah, so he's an all-star this year. He was an all-star 2 years ago. His offensive game right now looks like it's the best it's ever been. You put that offense next to those two guys, regardless of, if you're taking a little bit of hit on the defensive side. I know the defense this year hasn't been great regardless. But like you said, you're getting the best player available right now to pair with Tatum and Brown. You have 3 all-stars, 4 when Kemba's fully healthy, and then Marcus Smart, who's one of the best bench guys in the NBA. He's very unique. He can score when he needs to. And then you plug in the rest of those bench guys who've played a solid role. Tice, Robert Williams, Shemi Oshley's been okay. So like you said, I think he's probably the best option. Harrison Barnes is solid too, and then Tad Young's maybe like a safety valve at this point, which realistically is probably, knowing Danny, what's going to end up happening, unfortunately. But yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
and he's the cheaper end. He's like the 12 knockout of the TP too, so then you keep a decent amount of it, and then Thad Young would be non-guaranteed at that point, so you could put his money in there, and another team could cut him. So that does seem to end up being the realistic one. The other thing I like about Vucevic that I didn't mention is if you're able to unload Thompson and Tice and that kind of deal, that gets us to what we want with Rob, and who knows, Orlando might be dead set on getting Rob out of that. I think that's a really tough call at that moment in time. Do you part with Rob for Vucevic? I don't know. I was kind of hard-pressed to say yes at that point. But if you can line up Vucevic and Rob as your only centers, that's a pretty good offense-defense combo. And, with Vucevic spacing, you can maybe even play them a little bit together at that point. And I think that opens up the Rob possibilities in a way that a lot of people want to see. Again, I would temper your expectations because I think they're held down by this hard cap thing a little bit, and they're making excuses with that. And I think Ainge views the offseason ideologically as a place where there's a lot more opportunity, and they're going to have to be aggressive if they want to make something happen this year. It's a buyer's market. 20 teams are making the playoffs. It's going to be really hard to pull off a trade in season, but I think they're in a place where if they get a real aggressive with that TP and some of the assets that they have, they do have a leg up in that sense, particularly on Vucevic. Like, how many teams can match $28 million as easily as Boston can right now? There aren't a lot. So he remains my tier 1. I like the Collins possibility. I'd be happy with Barnes, but I think they need something significant to push this team closer to Brooklyn, to Milwaukee, to those top tier teams in East Philly. And Vucevic, what does he have against all those teams? He's 7 feet, so maybe he can stand in with Embiid a little bit than what they have now. He's killed the Bucks in the past. He has a great career record against the Bucks in Orlando. And then Brooklyn's pretty vulnerable inside. So you could use that to hit them a little bit. Like, that's another thing I like about Vucevic. So I think there's just a lot of context around Vucevic right now that even though there's questions about that cost and his age and defense and all that stuff, Celtics have money to spend. He's available. He's killing it right now, and he fills kind of a position of need on the team a little bit right now, or a place where they can upgrade significantly. So this is where they're at. They need to be aggressive. They need to spend a lot of money. And that's the only way they're going to be able to pull things off because those draft picks are gone. They don't have a lot of player assets. They're going to have to do this a little bit of a different way than I think Ainge wants to do it. So that's the question. Is he going to be able to adjust his ways a little bit? It's going to be so crucial to this team for him to do it and for him to budge a little bit on price.
And realistically, like you said, Orlando probably wants to rebuild. You throw them Tice contract expiring. You throw them, Romeo or Nesmith, a young asset, and then all those picks. That gets them off that huge contract, like you said, because Boston can just eat it. Gives them some youth, gives them a bunch of picks for the future. They can build around Isaac and Fultz and Cole Anthony and all those guys. So I feel like Boston's probably the best place they got to dump Vucevic if they're trying to get off his salary.
Bobby, what do you think the best option Danny is thinking about in the offseason? What do you think he's thinking towards? Because he's mentioned that. You're absolutely right. What do you think he's got his eye on?
Yeah, that's what's hard for me to read. The Dreams deal, I have this thing floating around in my head, and there is a real case that if Beal ever got uncomfortable in this position, Boston, because of Tatum, would be a place that he would push hard for. And so that's tricky because right now he fits into the TP. Over the offseason, his 2-year extension kicks in, and then he's 34. So you could still match it, but it becomes way harder at that point. Like, you'd have to funnel Kemba somewhere and just make all sorts of difficult things happen. And you can do it. I mean, the way Harden got traded to Brooklyn is a pretty good example of how convoluted this can get to, kick assets in a bunch of different directions and get a guy where you want to go. You can always line things up in that sense. And Mike Zarin's very well positioned to do that. But I think now would be the time to do Beal just because of the TP advantage they have. But Beal's not going anywhere this year. I think that Washington team's going to stay in the playoff race. They've been playing so well lately, and he's so comfortable there. I think he just likes living in Washington, and he's trying to be patient with the team, which I don't see a lot of upside for Washington, but he does, and I guess it's a little bit of a breath of fresh air for a star. I mean, he's broken the record this year for 40-point games with losses. I think it's 11 now at this point. So I don't know what he's holding out for on either end. I don't know what Beal's holding out for. I don't know what Ainge is holding out for because, honestly, there aren't a lot of big trade assets coming down the road that the Celtics would be well positioned to acquire at that point. And I just think there's a lot. I think you lose a lot of opportunity when you wait. Like during the season, there's much less competition for trades and assets in general than there's during the offseason. When the draft starts pushing you, then all of a sudden contracts aren't available. And then I think fall time, probably around September, the CP is going to expire. So at that point, the worst thing in the world that could happen is this team losing it.
Oh, don't even bring that up. That I can't imagine it. That's why it's painful. But Danny's got to do something with it. There's no way. All of my being needs to believe that Danny's going to do something with the TP. But yeah, I mean that's all the stuff I wanted to bring up. Sam, I don't know if you had anything else. I know Bobby.
I do have one question.
Alrighty.
Just quick. What's the empty garden been like, Bobby? I know you've gotten to go over there a couple times.
That's a good question.
It's interesting. So it's been pretty renovated. So it's interesting in its sense that all this new stuff in there, like the lounge on the top floor and the black seats. I think those are a little bit older, the new black seats and some of the other stuff in there. But it's got a new, fresh feel to it, and it's just so empty that it's weird that no one's taking advantage of those things. That's kind of what struck me on the inside. But I've seen the stands empty on TV, and you get that experience through watching the game, so that doesn't strike you all that much. But man, Causeway Street, like you don't have a feel for it being a game night and there being nothing going on around the stadium at all. Like just walking through the empty streets pregame at 5:00 on a game day is unimaginable, and then going into North Station, which is usually jammed with people trying to get up the stairs there to get in. It's like 2 or 3 people just waiting for a train. And you go upstairs and, probably like 15 media upstairs, and there's like a couple dozen Celtics officials in the stands, and that's it. So I kind of love being up on the top level there on the 9th floor because a lot of sound hits you. It rises up and you do hear a lot of things. And with the empty stadium, you hear stuff being called up from the bench. You hear players yelling on the floor, and if it's quiet enough, you can hear individual players saying things. That's a cool experience to me. I always loved covering games at Syracuse where you sat on the baseline. So, even though there were fans in the stands, you could hear a lot of stuff that was going on. To have no one in TD Garden, even though you're a little further away, you get that ear for the action, which I love as a reporter, to be able to hear some of those things and observe those things. So that's what sticks out to me, the surrounding of the Garden and just that game day feel. And then, leaving at 11:00 midnight, just nobody in the entire neighborhood. Like it's just completely, it's like a ghost town around there. It's unreal. So it's going to be good at the end of the month to get some fans back in there. And watching the Knicks and Nets the last couple games, the Knicks in particular, who have been awesome this year, even the 3,000 helps. Like going from 0 to 3,000 is a substantial enough jump to make a difference, even though it's, not a very good percentage of the stadium. The floor right now at 0 is just like absolutely nothing. It's just silent in there. And man, on Sunday, to think about what the reaction of the crowd would have been when Beal fell out of bounds and then Tatum hits that game winner. I feel like there's been about 10 to 12 moments in the Garden this year that would have been absolute insanity in the crowd reacting. And it's just been nothing, which is huge opportunity. You think of Tatum's game winner on opening night. You think of just a bunch of different moments throughout this year where it's
a bunch
like,
of Robert
wow,
Williams plays would have took off.
All that.
Pritchard, the fans will be going nuts about him. So it's good that they'll get that back soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Miss being a Garden. The whole surrounding area thing sounds the weirdest to me. Walking up and just.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah, that is strange because it's always busy. You've got my man Black Swan out there trying to give out his mixtape. You've got people packed into halftime pizza. It is a absolute ambience around the Garden all the time. There's none.
So weird. But yeah, with that, we'll let you go here, Bobby. Appreciate you stopping by. You guys can follow Bobby at Real Bob Manning on Twitter. Is that right?
Yep. And I wrote about my dog's going crazy now.
That's all good.
I want to shout out my piece. I wrote about Tatum versus Beal through the eyes of Drew Hanlon, and he gave some interesting insight on Tatum's struggles recently. So if you want to go check that out on CLNSmedia.com, it's up on the front page. And we talked a little bit about Tatum's comeback from COVID and, him and Beal's relationship, which I know a lot of people are interested in. So it was a good interview.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Bobby. Thanks. Shout out Bobby's dog as well, joining us on the show. You guys can follow us at Bannertown USA. Follow Bobby at Real Bob Manning on Twitter and CLNS Media. Check out all the stuff, including that piece. And with that, Sam, wrap us up.
Yeah, follow the guys. Big thanks to Bobby again for coming on, and CLNS. We've had a lot of their personnel on. They're always a great time. Give Jack a follow at JackSimoneNBA. Follow Bannertown if you don't already. If you're listening, then watch the YouTube video. If you're watching, then listen on Spotify. Thanks a whole lot. That's our show for today. Bye.